We're in the middle of a summer to remember. We're considering verses that we can think about when we're in different states of emotion, when we're worried, things that we can remember, and when we're weary, things that we can remember, and when we're ashamed as well. We talked about what shame is, and when you think of a face that evidences shame, you think of this. When somebody is ashamed, they look down and they look away. Shame is when I'm ashamed, I lose face. And that's literally what shame causes. When I feel exposed, I feel that things are about me, are seen that I don't want to be seen. The way we respond usually is we lose face. We want to look away because we get embarrassed. Sometimes our face gets red. We don't want people to see how red our face is, so we turn our face down and away. The Chinese have a saying. We talk about it as well. They talk about losing face. And you never want to point out somebody's deficiencies in a way that causes them to feel bad, to feel ashamed. When we lose face, we turn our face away from others, and that's literally the look of shame. It's looking down and away, and we turn our face towards ourselves. Although we turn away from others, when we're ashamed, we are looking at ourselves, and oftentimes in a way that's not very kind. You stupid, why did you do that? Why did you let him see that? I knew, and that seems to be what happens. We become very harsh with ourselves. Now, people outside can't see that, but that's what's happening inside. And the way we respond oftentimes, we try to save face. When we lose face, we want to regain a sense of being okay by doing things or being someone who gets people to admire them. So we want to become successful or popular or beautiful. Because when we're successful or popular or beautiful, people look at us and say, oh, wow, you are so successful and popular. You are so beautiful. And we see their sense of glow, and it makes us feel better about ourselves. And it helps us to forget the way we're looking at ourselves. It helps us not to be so mindful of the things that we feel inside. The last place that we are prone to look, many of us, is to look towards God. To look towards God. That's the last place. There was a movie, Dial M for Murder. And I think, if I remember the movie, I think the plot was these kids are having some fun, and so they're just making prank phone calls. And here's what they say. I know who you are, and I saw what you did. Click. And they do this, they have some fun with it, and they happen to call a person who's guilty of murder. This person then hunts them down, and that's the premise of the movie. They think it's kind of just like a prank, and it ends up turning out to be much more than they thought. I dare say that if we, each one of us, got that kind of phone call, I think. What's that? Is this not working? Yeah. Dare say that all of us, we have secrets, and if we got a call on the phone that said those words, I know who you are and I saw what you did, I think all of us would react. We all have things of which we are ashamed. And although we're not going to get that call, it's hard for us to forget the fact that God knows everything. He not only knows what we've done that other people have seen, He knows what we've done that no one has seen. He knows what we think when... thanks, Jay. Thanks, Jay. Okay. The fact that God knows so much about us makes Him a very unlikely place to turn when we become ashamed. Surprisingly, the Father is merciful, and that's what we learn in the verse. Look what it says in the first verse on the sheet that's in your worship folder. The very first one, point 1, here's what it says. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. What does it mean when it says that God is merciful? By the way, that's our verse for today. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Listen to what it says. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. And if we're to act like children of God, God is merciful. That means we act mercifully. Let's say it together. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. What does that mean when it says that the Father is merciful and that we're supposed to be merciful? What does that mean? It means for the Father that He's kind to the ungrateful, and He is kind to the wicked. He loves His enemies. He does good to His enemies. He lends without expecting to get anything back. When we're ashamed, it's very easy to forget that God is merciful, that He is kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked. When we are ashamed, it's very difficult to remember that God is merciful, that He is kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked. Very difficult to remember that a verse that we looked at a couple weeks ago. Like, can we say this together? Say that one more time. When we feel ashamed, we feel like the things that we've done bad, we're very conscious of them. We feel that God is very conscious of them as well. And when we do things that make us feel foolish, we feel less loved by people. It's easy to believe or to assume that God is the same, that when we do things that don't please Him, He stops love. But look what it says here. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And we looked at a couple things: still powerless, still sinners, still loved. God loved us when we were at a point where we were unable to do what He wants us to do, when we were doing what He doesn't want us to do. That's when He sent Christ to die for us. And what the Bible indicates, that's how God demonstrates His love for us. Not only what He does, but when He does it. What does He do? He sends His Son so that we could share in immortal life. Okay, when did He do it? When we were sitting up straight in church? When we were doing things well? No. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. See, God demonstrates His love not only by what He does, but by when He does it. When we are turning our back on Him, when we are ungrateful, when we are being wicked, that's when God initiates love towards us. We say, whoa, that's not the kind of love that I experience very often. God says, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. God is merciful. While we're still sinners, He died. Look what it says in the second verse. Now, when a man works, his wages are not credited to him as a gift, but as an obligation. However, to the man who does not work, but trusts God, who justifies the wicked, his faith is credited as righteousness. Let's read that one more time with me, and just read along with me. I'll read it out loud. Now, when a man works, his wages are not credited to him as a gift, but as an obligation. However, to the man who does not work, but trusts God, who justifies the wicked, his faith is credited as righteous. When God bestows the status of righteousness on someone, He doesn't do it as a reward. So if God's going to say, you are righteous, He's not going to do that because He checks your righteous deeds, checks your unrighteous deeds, your righteous outbalance your unrighteous. That's not the way He does it. That's kind of like working for it. And if God were to do that and look at your record of acts, let's see that as kind of like a time card. You know, when you go into work, you punch a time card. Let's imagine that there are cards, but they're not time cards, they're deed cards. And that when you do something good, it registers on this card. And when you do something bad, it registers on this card. And what it's saying here is that when God says, I'm going to determine if you're righteous or not, this is not the way he does it. He doesn't go, okay, let me see your cards. And here's 2 cards. Okay, here's my good card. And where's the bad card? Here's the bad card. And God doesn't go, okay, let's look at them. Show one of the obvious. Okay, you got this many. One of the obvious, you got this many. I'm sorry, you earn unrighteousness. You're not righteous. You're not going to live forever with me. Or if you do, your righteousness out, you have more good than bad. Because that's almost like getting paid. And when God credits somebody as righteous, he doesn't do it because they earn it. Otherwise, well, you know what I mean. If you get paid, it's not a gift, is it? When you get paid at work, you don't sit down on Saturday. You get paid on Friday. A lot of people get paid on Friday. Maybe you don't. Maybe you get paid halfway through the month and at the end of the month. But you don't sit down when you got a paycheck and say, I'm going to write a thank you note. Dear so-and-so, thank you so much for the generous gift. Why wouldn't you do that? You worked for it. He owes it to you. He's obligated to give it to you. And God is the same way. He's not going to assess your positive and negative. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a gift. What it says here, God justifies the wicked. The wicked who understands they're wicked and understands that God is merciful. What does mercy mean? That God is kind to the ungrateful and he's kind to the wicked. That's what God would have us believe. God doesn't reward the righteous. He doesn't reward the purpose-driven. He doesn't reward the politically conservative. God rescues the wicked. Why? Because he's merciful. And somebody who is merciful is kind to the ungrateful and kind to the wicked. I ran into a story. I found some more details. It's about an individual by the name of Johnny Lingo, a man who lived in the South Pacific. The islanders in the South Pacific Islands spoke very well of him. He was strong, good-looking, and very intelligent. When it came time for him to find a wife, people shook their heads in disbelief because Johnny Lingo chose a plain, skinny woman who walked with her shoulders hunched and her head down. She was very hesitant and shy. She was older than the other women in the village, which did nothing for her value, but this man loved her, and so we know that this woman was ashamed. She was ashamed because everyone assessed her as being not a very marriageable woman. And when they decided who was going to get married and who wouldn't, they said, that woman's never going to get married. When Johnny Lingo came into the island, everyone, the women who wanted to be married, they tried to appeal to him, and they were shocked when Johnny Lingo chose this woman that no one felt would ever be married. We find the story goes on that what surprised everyone the most was what Johnny offered to the father in order to kind of pay the father for the privilege of marrying her. In that culture, in order to obtain a wife, you paid for her by giving her father, this is true, cows. You'd give the father cows. And a man wanting to marry a woman would have to pay the father to marry the woman, and he would pay her in cows. Now, most women who were decent, they got 4 to 5 cows. So you're a 4 to 5 cow woman. You were kind of the median. You were kind of the average. There were some women who were only 1 or 2 cow women, and they walked around like this. Because the amount of cows that somebody paid for you indicated your worth. And so everybody knew how many cows each woman was worth, 4 to 6, 1 to 2, and they figured, what's this woman going to get? Is it possible to split a cow in half? Half a cow woman. And they were really surprised when Johnny offered her father 10 cows. No one had ever been worth 10 cows, and the father thought that he was kidding. He thought it was a joke. But he didn't. He offered her, and he would settle for no less than 10 cows. And that's what happened. Here that several months after the wedding, a visitor from the United States came to the island to trade, heard the story of Johnny Lingo and his 10-cow wife. Upon meeting Johnny and his wife, the visitor was taken aback since she wasn't shy, plain, and hesitant, but was beautiful, poised, and confident. The visitor asked about this transformation, and Johnny Lingo's response was very simple. I wanted a 10-cow woman, and when I paid that for her and treated her in that fashion, she began to believe that she was a 10-cow woman. So it's kind of like, what's the point, Mike? You can get a sense of worth by what somebody is willing to invest in order to secure or to be in a relationship. If God cares about you so much that he sends his son in order that you might be in an eternal relationship with him, I dare say that makes you more valuable than a 10-cow woman. The fact that God would send his son. And so what, you might say? Understanding, getting our sense of significance from the light of the Father's face changes us. When this woman looked into the eyes of this man that everybody wanted to be with and saw a sense of value coming, it not only changed her thoughts, it changed her. She stopped trying to live in the shame of other people's shaming looks, and she started to live in the light of this look, and she put her shoulders back and her head erect, and she became a different woman, I dare say. To the degree we believe that we are loved, even though we do stupid things, God is merciful. He's kind to the ungrateful. He's kind to the wicked. He wants to be in a relationship. And when we stop seeing scowls on the Father's face, you're a one-cow person. When we start to see his value, how he values us based on what he gave in order to have a relationship with us, it does impact with us. It does impact us. You might say, well, yeah, that's all well and good, but what about when we stray? Sure, he sends his son to die for us, but now if we're in a relationship with him, what about when we go astray? Here's the verse we looked at last week. Can we read this together? Go ahead. He is... Could you read that one more time? Go ahead. And when you put those verses together, they really say something. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He is able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and are going astray. What it's describing here, those who are ignorant and are going astray, it's describing sheep. And the point is that a sheep, it's not a matter of they might go astray. Sheep are just not intelligent. If you leave a sheep to care for itself, the sheep will inevitably go astray because they're not smart enough to know what's healthy and what's not healthy, what will be for their good and what won't be for their good. And what the Bible describes us as sheep, it says there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end of that way is death. If you leave us on our own, God would say, we would just as soon stray into something that, well, that looks good, and walk into something that's very harmful. Now, the fact is that's dangerous, but God understands this. That's what it means. He is able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and are going astray because God is a shepherd. He understands we're sheep. A good shepherd understands the level of care that the sheep require. Therefore, when a sheep goes astray, he doesn't, oh my goodness, what in the world? A good shepherd is never disillusioned about what a sheep does. A good shepherd never says, oh, I can't believe it. There's green pasture, you walk towards brown pasture. What is wrong with you? And the reason why a good shepherd would never do that, they're never disillusioned, because a good shepherd's never illusioned in the first place. He understands what sheep are like. And so when they do sheep things, he doesn't go, oh, and fly off the handle. God understands that we're sheep. He understands that we're ignorant and we go astray. So when we do go astray, he doesn't throw off his clipboard and go, oh my goodness, I am really disillusioned. Because the fact is, God's not illusioned about you in the first place. And he's not illusioned about me. He knows that we're ignorant and we go astray. But he's a good shepherd and he wants us to believe that. The Father is merciful. That's what it says here. He is kind to the ungrateful. He is kind to the wicked. And what he says, not only is the Father merciful, but go and do likewise. Go and do likewise. Let's read the story that was the text of the VeggieTales story. Look what it says. Luke chapter 10. Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So, too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said. And when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Go and do likewise. You see, biblically, mercy is not something that you feel. Mercy is something that you do. That's what he said. The person who reached out and took care of the Samaritan had mercy. And what Jesus says, go and feel the way the Good Samaritan felt. No, he says, go and do likewise. Biblically, mercy is not a feeling. Now, mercy can be a feeling of emotion and compassion, but when the Bible uses the word, it's not primarily a psychological term. What it is, it's more of a legal term. And here's how it came to be applied. If I am the king of a powerful nation, and you are the king of a less powerful nation, oftentimes kingdoms would come into treaties with one another. And the powerful king would come into a treaty with the less powerful king. And the nature of the treaty would be something like the less powerful nation saying to the more powerful king, we are surrounded by hostile countries. We can't protect ourselves. But everybody's afraid of you. So what we want you to do is we want you to come into an arrangement with us and protect us if we should get attacked. That happened very often. And what the king of the powerful nation would do is say, okay, I will do that, and here's what I want you to do. And oftentimes it was, I want you to give me so many bushel of crops or so much silver. There would be an arrangement. When the less powerful nation came under attack, now, it might not be a very convenient time for this king to leave his kingdom. The act of sending soldiers to defend that nation was called mercy. Now, it had nothing to do with feelings. It wasn't, oh, I feel really bad, you're in a terrible place, I'll send some troops because I feel bad. That wasn't the sense. It was, I have an obligation. We've entered into an agreement, and whether I feel like it or not, I am going to come to your aid. And then when he did so, that was mercy. That's literally what it is. It's a legal term. And what drives mercy is not emotion, biblically, but faithfulness. We looked at a definition. I read it in a commentary that describes words in the Bible and kind of amplifies what they mean. It talks about what does it mean to be saved. And here's what I found. And people need to be saved when, I shared this last week, but I think it's important for us to understand what the Bible means when it talks about Jesus being a Savior and us needing to be saved. People need to be saved when, through their own fault or through some superior power, they come under the control of someone else. And when the Bible talks about somebody being saved, it's because they have come to be enslaved or controlled by someone or something. Being thus controlled, they've lost their freedom to implement their will and decisions. Somebody who needs to be saved because they're under the control of somebody else who will not allow them to do what they want to do. The person in control, They demand that the person do what they want the person to do, and the person is helpless. That's when a person needs to be saved. Their own resources are inadequate to deal with that other power. And again, they're under the control of someone who dictates to them, and they aren't strong enough to push this person away and do what they want to do. That's why they need to be saved, and finally, they can only gain their freedom by the intervention of a third party. And when the Bible describes Jesus being a Savior, this is what it's talking about. Us being in a position not of freedom, but of slavery. Being enslaved to do things to protect or provide for ourselves, but ultimately we're enslaved to sin. We have some choices about some things, but ultimately, what the Bible would indicate, we're under the control of the power of sin. And therefore, we do ultimately what sin wants us to do. We can't, through self-will or freedom of choice, get rid of the influence of sin. We can do it maybe for a short while, but we get pulled back in. That's what the Bible indicates. We're in slavery to things and to behaviors and activities that we might want to stop doing, but we can't stop. See, some people don't feel enslaved to sin until they try to stop. None of us has the power to break free of the control of sin. So when God saves, that's what it means. He sends His Son so that through the intervention of Christ, the power of sin can be broken. Doesn't mean that we're perfect in this life, but that He rescues us, takes us by the hand out of the prison camp of sin into the kingdom of His Son, where ultimately we'll spend eternity with Him. Why would God do that to somebody who is stuck in sin, like you and I? See, that's the question. God demonstrates His own love toward us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Jesus died for us when we weren't able to make choices towards God. That's when God demonstrated His love towards us, and that He reaches to pull us out of a situation that we can't pull ourselves out of. Here's the truth. God is kind to the ungrateful and kind to the wicked. Some of us haven't been raised believing that that is what defines God. Our verse indicates very clearly that our Father is merciful, and that means He is kind to the ungrateful and kind to the wicked. Here's a question. I wonder what would happen if we believed that. How would it affect you if you were to believe that? That God is merciful, that He's kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. I dare say, when you got in a place where you messed up and you understood that God was kind to the ungrateful and the wicked, I dare say that you would find the ability to not do this and to walk around hunched. You would find an ability, knowing that the Father is merciful, to come to Him and to say, I'm glad You're my shepherd, and I need help. I fall into stuff like that, and in being able to turn to the Father, I think that would change us. I think that's what it means to believe, and that's the importance of believing. When we talk about things to remember, when we've done something wrong, it's very easy for us to be so preoccupied with what we've done that we just focus on what we've done. We can't get our mind off of it. Can I give you something to remember? When you get in a place where you mess up, and some of you, we mess up, here's what I'm going to encourage you to think about. I'm going to encourage you, when you sin and are aware of sin, to run some verses through your head. Verse number 1. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Remember that when you're aware of doing something wrong. Remember the second verse. He is able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and are going astray. I want you to imagine that you just did that sin that you do, the one that maybe other people don't know that you do. How would it impact you if you were to intentionally choose to remember, okay, I feel rotten that I did that thing, but it says that while I'm still a sinner, Christ died for me. It says He's able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and are going astray. How would that impact you? I think you'd feel less alone. I think you'd feel like you had a shepherd. And he tells you, be merciful just as your Father is merciful. God sends Jesus to provide a way of rescue. And when we're aware of that, we're in a position where we can reach out to somebody else. When we're ashamed, do two things. Number one, remember that the Father is merciful. Number two, go and do likewise. The last verse, look what it says. It says, but speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law that gives freedom, because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Mercy triumphs over judgment. To be merciful to other people is very important. Here's what this verse is saying, I believe, and here's where we'll close. What you think about God will greatly impact how you treat others. If we are conscious that the Father is merciful, and do you remember what that means? For that the Father is merciful, kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked. If we're conscious that that is what the Father is like, when we come across people who are ungrateful or are wicked, if we remember that's what He is like, it will help us to treat them in a merciful way. If, however, we forget that God is unkind, if we forget that God is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked, what will happen is that we will not be merciful. We will become very judgmental, very judgmental. This person doesn't deserve my mercy. And sometimes in the history of religion, there have been many groups where people are very critical and harsh, very judgmental. Some of us have been in religious establishments that were like that. We find ourselves being like that. We compare ourselves with others. We look at what we're doing in order to try to make God happy. We look at others who aren't doing as much. We're prone to believe that God is judgmental, that He comes into this world and He's looking at what people are doing wrong and He's going, oh, that makes me mad. Does God hate sin? Does God spend all of His days looking at what people are doing wrong and going, oh, gosh, I can't, look, oh, gee whiz. Growing up, we used to hear that, God hates it when kids run in church. Some of us have been in churches like that. Don't run in church. This is God's house. He hates it when you run in church. And I imagine that there's kids who run in church every week. Sunday must be God's worst day. I mean, kids scrambling all around, and oh my goodness. But it's not what it says is true about God. What does it say? God is kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked. When we remember that, it helps us to treat people differently. Do you fall into being judgmental? Are you quick, like me, to notice what other people do wrong? Now, I think there's some discernment that has to happen, but sometimes our noticing isn't very kind. What are you supposed to do? The verse said God will judge. I'm not telling you to be conscious of God's judgment. That's not going to help you to treat anybody better. Here's what I would have you think about, that God is merciful. He's kind to the ungrateful and kind to the wicked. If you find yourself being judgmental, here's what I want you to remember. The Father is merciful. He's kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked. And as you start to become clearer about what the Father is like, it will help you to change, knowing that you're to be like Him. He's kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked. He would have us be the same. The worship team's going to come up now and do a closing song. What do you take from here? Again, when we're ashamed, a couple things to remember. Remember that the Father is merciful. Go and do likewise. Mercy is not a feeling, it's something you do. When somebody's stuck, when somebody's fallen, when they're in need, be kind, even when they're ungrateful and they're wicked. That's what God would have us to do. And if you remember that that's what God is like, it will give you the power to act like Him. Over in the library right across. If anybody wants to talk about being baptized today, it's still not too late. We have a good number of being baptized. If you want to be part of that, come back, and if you have any questions, I'll answer them, and perhaps you'll be able to follow Christ in that way this afternoon. Okay, let me pray for us. Father, thank you for revealing your character to us, for clarifying what you're like. And Jesus does that, and I'm glad his words are recorded so that the things that he expresses about you, we can learn about you. It says that you're merciful, you're kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked, and that gives us comfort. It also challenges us to reflect that towards others who are ungrateful to us as well. Help us to be merciful just as you are merciful. In Jesus' name, amen. Again.